exit plan for Chainlink. It's been requested quite a few times, so I thought, why not do it? I've done a price prediction on this. Feel free to check that out. I've also talked about a potential investment in this if it goes below a certain number, which I may well or may not tell you. However, thus being said, there's a lot of room to the upside still on Chainlink, and there's a lot of holders clearly in my community and in my following on YouTube, so it's been requested, right? So let's talk about it. Now, again, this is all subjective, whether you think it's going to be a successful period in the next year or two for Chainlink with the new adaptations to it. It is a much better asset. I've often said it's been a bit shit, but since it's made some big changes, it's much better. And yeah, things do develop and grow. So let's talk about the obvious. Now, by the way, subjectivity of these types of videos are profit taking, right? Yes, feel free to comment, but I'm going to give you a reason why. It's always good to take profit on the way up, little bits here and there to gradually secure the bag for two reasons. One, you don't know how long it's going to go up for, and the obvious one is it's good to make money, right? If you had the conviction and the bollocks to buy in a consolidation period and you are not rewarding yourself, you probably should be. It's all about taking little bits off as you go. It's also good for tax reasons. I know I hate using that word, but it is, because if it falls in different years and different periods, it's better to take some in one year and not in another, if that makes sense, for obvious reasons, right? You don't have a massive tax bill when you can split it out a little bit. Common sense. So what I tend to do, I like to use Fibonacci for this situation, but I also like to look at key levels on these higher weekly or monthly timeframes. The best way to look at it is on a line chart. It's up to you how you want to do this, but I've talked about in other videos. I will put what I feel in terms of what my opinion is on Patreon as well, in terms of profit taking as a chart. So if you want to go back, you can go back on Patreon and look at each one. I've got like 11 different coins in there now, I think, in different pairs. So it's getting quite big. Now, we are actually, in my opinion, on a potential profit taking zone. If you were buying at roughly $5, $6, in my opinion, you could probably take 10% out easily. Some people may not want to do that. So we're going to ignore that one and just go a little bit higher. Now, for me, it's kind of obvious to look at these levels, in my opinion. This one here, $18, right? Roughly around this level here. This has to be a potential take profit, not if you're buying today, but if you are buying at that consolidation zone, because it's kind of bloody obvious, right? So I would easily say TP 10% there. Easy. Because that's money. That is money that could be easily made. Now, if you think about it in terms of if you were buying at these like $6, $5 level, whatever, and you've not taken money off and a 3x, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life, right? I know it doesn't sound like glamorous, but this is a higher cap coin. A higher cap coin is not going to move mountains, right? But that's kind of obvious, right? But anyways, the next obvious one from this point is very clearly around here. Why? This is going to be interesting because there's a lot of resistance here, a lot of support as well, right? There's 3 levels of resistance and there's 2 levels of support technically. That is a huge level, roughly between $26 and $27, roughly 50% of the entire move in terms of a correction. $28. As I say, if you're buying at this consolidation level going to $28, you're probably thinking, it's not a bad place to be. So yeah, there's another obvious one. It gets a little bit dicey up towards here though, as you can probably imagine. There's a big, massive level of resistance here at the 618 levels. Let's be honest, come on. You've got to plonk something around here. As I say, it's all subjective, but I know people in the comments will be like, but it's going to go to whatever. Yeah, but at the same time, it might not. You got to look at that as a factor. Let me just make that nice and neat. So this is where it gets interesting for Chainlink, in my opinion. Do I think it's going to go much higher than all-time high? Probably yes. I think it will. And I will talk about the BTC pair in a bit. However, the fundamentals have changed. It has become a much better asset. This is just kind of filling your bags, getting you some, equity from unrealized profit to realized profit, especially if you were buying at these lows. And these lows have delivered you a 5x pretty simply, right? Now, to some people, that's not enough, but you still got 70% of your entire holdings in this quite nicely. This can go much higher. As I've talked about previous levels, this is where I think Chainlink can go in the future if it has a great bull cycle. Basically, double its all-time high, right? If you are looking to maybe ride the lightning a little bit and you've secured the bag and you've taken your risk out, you may well be looking at, well, you can ride it much higher, and looking at certain levels, it could get very, 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 very interesting, right? Especially if you're looking at the charts. Now, that would give you a massive equity boost, especially if you're buying at $6, $7, $8, right? But that being said, it's good to have the risk out of the play. Now, what I would say here is, obviously, if you're looking at all-time high and you've not taken anything off the table, you probably should be taking something off here as well. And as I say, probably another 10%. I would say you could probably do that on a lot of these assets, but you want to keep something in. The main policy of any investing as a speculative asset is to take your risk out when you can. If it is then risk-free, winning. So what I mean by that is, say if you put $1,000 in at say $5, right? You put $1,000 in down here. The goal is at some point in this period here is to take that $1,000 out and hopefully let the rest run as long as you can, and then the emotions are not as mental. Because if you are putting money in from your salary or whatever into an asset, it becomes a bit dicey, especially when you're panicking a little bit. Emotions, right? So you got to be somewhat alert to that. Now, when we talk about this, obviously, yes, you've taken potentially 40% out, you've still got 60%. The biggest returns that you're going to get is whenever it's moving $6, $7, $8 every single time towards these points, you are making a multiple on your investment if you bought at the bottoms, right? Now, all I'm going to say is this. Once it's above this point, you may well be on a point where, well, just let it run. You got 6% and you got potential targets. Fib targets here, 65, 82, and 129. Could be areas where you can take even more profit as you go. You have to have a period where you're thinking to yourself, well, you got to let it run. You got to let it do something, because as I say, take your risk bag out, pay yourself, and ultimately, more importantly, just enjoy the run. Some people, though, don't. What people tend to do, and this is very, very obvious, they just buy low, right? They see it do this, but they don't actually take any profit because they think it's going to go higher, and then they round trip it right the way back down. So what people tend to do is like, hey, and then all of a sudden it comes back down on them, and they don't take any profit. And it's like they're just holding the bag forever. I've seen a really interesting comment about a lot of people recently. I always say to people, be exposed to the market, right? And someone went, I've always been exposed because I've never sold anything. And you think to yourself, well, what the fuck? You've got to be somewhat kind of ready to make money at some point, right? Anyways, that's a simple plan in terms of Chainlink. It's kind of an obvious plan with Chainlink because it's got some really juicy levels. But as I say, this time period right now, realistically, when you're getting towards these big juicy levels where it's going to be more and more liquidity there, you've got to take your risk bag out. Let's be honest, if you put money in, you got to try and use that profit, keep the profit, and then take whatever you can out. So it's risk-free. Risk-free is a good trade, right? Anyways, let's talk about the BTC pair because I think this is going to be important too. Why? I've often talked about the BTC pair in a negative light with Chainlink, and it's true when you look at the data. But this has got a bit of running to do, essentially, especially also at Bitcoin as well. You know, we are at levels of resistance here. This is a huge level of resistance. It's had a nice little run anyways, right? But there's certain levels here where you can look at and you can think, well, you can take some profits literally quite easily around some of these levels very, very effectively, right? So this is a one level here where you gotta look at, let's be honest. If you are not taking profit there, this is like a massive level, by the way. I would say 10%, obviously. But the thing with this is it might not actually go there, so we're doing it in reverse because the BTC pairs are pretty damn powerful, realistically, when you think about it. So be somewhat careful. Why? Because it can, you know, we've seen it in the past. Now, this is a bull cycle and it's going down. Didn't keep up, right? Maybe this time it will. So it's at levels of resistance now. Obviously, if you're buying down here and you've made some BTC, cool, crack on, that's fine. But not everyone may be as willing to take profit. But what I will say here is, I think you can probably do it around here, right? A little bit higher from this point where you can make some actual genuine BTC, which is pretty good, right? So when we're looking at that, if you're buying these levels down here and the price would have been roughly in that consolidation zone, roughly around $6, $7, you know, you've actually made and doubled part of your Bitcoin bag if you put a decent chunk in, which isn't too bad. So that is an obvious level. When we see that on the chart, You can see clear levels of resistance, again, clear levels, again, clear level. And then from there on, it's actually like, well, let's see where it goes. Whether it gets up there or not, I don't know. But you got to think, well, if you are going to double your BTC, triple your BTC, whatever it may be, but also Bitcoin then does a 2 or 3x from this point, you're going to make some decent money. Put it that way. Anyways, Chainlink covered, nice and simple. Not going to go too deep on the BTC pairs, but obviously this is a really juicy level. If you are looking to trade some BTC from some low orders, get some free Bitcoin, essentially. Anyways, if you like my stuff, leave a like, comment, all that kind of good stuff. See you later.